It is International Men's Health Week, and mental health is a big part of that. While anyone can experience depression or anxiety, men often tend to avoid seeking help. Research from Compare the Market shows half of American men have suffered from poor mental health. More than 3/4 of them say they wouldn't talk about it because they're too embarrassed or because of the stigma surrounding men's mental health. About a quarter say they've experienced suicidal thoughts. While many signs of depression and anxiety in men and women overlap, men will often experience headaches or other physical symptoms as well.
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo all the way from Mexico City with co-host featuring socialist Andy Lipson. All the way from where, Andy?
Columbia, Missouri.
Moving about.
Yes. Well, this is where my mom. This is where my mom is located.
I see.
Yeah.
We're online at whatsappodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find my personal social media handle as at Don Eduardo Barca. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. We have merch as well. If you would like a shirt, contact us through our site at whatsappodcast.com. All right, thank you. All right, so today we are joined by Jonathan Sanchez. Jonathan, father, educator, community member of the Mission District in San Francisco, California, here to join us and to have a discussion on a topic that was relevant of last month, the last month of June, which was men's mental health. But beyond that, I think even though we're in July, I think the conversation is always relevant because we haven't actually had a conversation about specifically men and issues related around that, and even people who aren't men but around who are affected by as well the issues that men face, anywhere from violence, isolation, and the like. But I think we'll let Jonathan and us have that discussion to further explore that. So welcome, Jonathan.
Hey, you guys, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, why don't you tell us, Jonathan, what is your, we say, not sometimes, excuse me, at the end of every show, I end and in the outro, and people don't pay attention, but I want people to remember this. I say, if you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. So if anyone is out there listening to this, this is exactly what I mean. People can contact us through our blog, and Andy will, I always say it and give credit to Andy. Andy will most likely answer you, and he's the one who's going to bring up the topic, or someone can contact me directly. Now, Jonathan decided to do just that. So that's why I appreciate this episode being an idea that a listener, as Jonathan is a listener, has suggested something for us to cover. Jonathan, why do you think this topic is important?
Definitely. I mean, the reason why I think it's important is because it's really not talked about. That's the reality. You have just last month, in the month of June, that it's all being recognized and honored with Pride Month. You have corporations and companies like Target, like Levi, like Calvin Klein, AT&T, and the list goes on that recognize Pride Month. But what about Men's Mental Health Month? And that, to me, really talks a lot about how our society view us as men. And I think that, it's important to talk about what I consider more of a epidemic in the silence amongst this nation and around the world, but I would mainly focus on this nation to discuss about, how we're actually going through the process of overcoming challenges in our mental health as men. And that's the reason why I think it's important to bring it up. No one really talks about it once again, and it's time for people to have open conversations. And this is the reason why I brought it up. And yeah,
here's what comes up to me for men's mental health when I hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree that particularly in left circles and in progressive places, people would say, we don't need that, like, because men run society, which I don't agree with. Capitalists run society, and not all capitalists are men, and not all capitalists are white, and not all capitalists are straight. But there is a notion, and what I agree with is I do believe sexism exists. I do believe that women face additional types of oppression in a capitalist society. I don't think they derive from men, but often women will experience it from men. But I do believe as a man that there are pressures on me. There are pressures that are, I'm not going to necessarily say they're unique for me, but I definitely experience it. Things that feel like a weight and that make it harder for me to just walk through the world. So that's how I hear you talking about this. So I'll say it in that way and then see what part of, before we go through for you, what are those like oppressions, if you will, the actual experiences that you don't like as being a man. Let me see if that framing is a framing you would agree with, or how you might put it differently.
I mean, yeah, I would say so, and as we, have a conversation, we can explore where we continue to agree or see if we have a difference. But yeah, I mean, that would pretty much, yeah, as a starter.
And Eduardo, does that sound right to you?
I agree that I think it's capitalism that that really does oppress men and women to feel that they don't have a place in our society unless they're used in order for competitive gains, to be able to compete against each other, and that's the division that is created. And in turn, the expectations or whatever they go through, which men go through, are then experienced in a way that gives them this weight, carrying around the world what their meaning, or what significant role they play in society.
Yeah, and I think there would be some people who would say this is not a conversation worth having because, like, men are fine, and that in of itself speaks to a problem, I would say. So, Jonathan, maybe, and so I'm glad, Jonathan, you brought this up. I didn't actually know before Eduardo had told me that it was Mental Health Month in June, but I think I'm glad you brought this topic up because I'm interested in talking about it. So maybe you want to start and say how you feel like this plays out for you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I have been through, challenges in my life where I've had to face, expectations from society that, expect me to be a certain type of way. And I think that, it's not something that's very common to talk about because, like you said, a lot of times um, people in certain social circles are going to feel and think that men are fine, men are okay. They talk that they're fine, they talk like they're okay, and that we don't need to really pay attention to this. I'm not part of that group. I'm not part of, certain people that can categorize me in certain spaces. Like, for example, you mentioned, certain people on the left, maybe, I don't know, maybe they feel or think that by talking about this, it aligns with Andrew Tate or Dana White, right? And I'm not part of that. That's not who I represent. In fact, there are some disagreements, and they're not always relatable to what I believe. But I do think that, when we talk about individuals who become groups, that men that I've known personally, and including myself, that do struggle, that do try to do what's right for us, for our families, or for our loved ones. I think that people don't recognize that. I'll give you an example. If I'm at the library and I'm with my son, and there is someone who's bothering me, or someone who wants to create a problem with me at the library while I'm with my son doing homework, no one really does anything about it. But I bet you, if I was a woman, if I was a single mother, or even a mother itself with a child, I bet you somebody would stand up And so these are the types of areas I like to bring up, because that in itself does affect over the years as time goes by. And I think that's, my goal. My goal is to talk about these things. And I get it. A lot of us men, specifically, straight males, they don't report certain things like this. They don't talk certain things like this. And my whole goal is to talk about it because it is a problem. But I think that overall men do have, right, whether you are heterosexual or you are homosexual, you are going to have mental health issues. Um, but I think that when it comes to straight males, you are going to have a significant amount of people who are not going to talk about it with their boys, their friends. They are not going to be like when a group of women come along and they talk, like some soccer moms or a group of women talk in college. They talk about what happened, their issues, whether it's family, romantic relationships. You're going to have that comfort. I've seen it. With men, you don't see that. Now, is that to say that we should be, um, because we all consider to be a man and not discuss these things? I think we should definitely discuss it more and not just be in the sense of, well, you just got to man up, right? There's a lot of these phrases I hear all the time. A man of your word, be a man. You got to man up, right? Happy wife, happy life. There are all these phrases that are expectations from men that we do when we take responsibilities. And I think it's important for us to address it, and it's not being addressed out there. It's not being promoted out there. So that's kind of like what I wanted to share in this conversation with you guys.
I really agree with that. As you were talking, I was thinking about one of the ways we talk about sexism is that all of the all of the responsibilities of childhood are born on the woman in the family generally. I like that's the stereotype, and so women, that falls on their heads. But when I think of things like the terms you're bringing of man up, be a man, um, expected to stand on your own feet, which is why a person wouldn't help you in the library, right?
Yeah.
That's basically, again, basically saying that all the problems of capitalism, as a single man, you can solve them. You can bear that weight, and if you can't, then they have those terms like you're a beta, right? Like alpha male versus beta male and things like that. Like, and all those things are men use against each other actually, and are only helpful to our oppressors in basically saying, look, we're all under here bearing a yoke that is much more than any single people can bear, both women and men. And it's not just happening to women, it's actually happening to men. And I think the fact that men are discouraged from talking to each other about their problems, that men are discouraged. Like I was watching, I'm here in Missouri, I have my nieces down, and a set of nieces got very bad news that their great grandmother had literally on that day passed away. And they went and they grieved and they came back. And then my other nieces were just like looking at them and said, "Hey, let me give you a hug." And I watched that, like two female nieces hugging two other female nieces. And like I watched how they comfort each other. And
Mhm.
like, are you expecting me to say that a male, like I'm just saying like that would not be done, like males would not have that happen. But are
Yeah.
you expecting me to believe that men would not feel better to be hugged in a time of loss like that? Are you expecting me to feel like, and secondly, men wouldn't even be crying necessarily like they were crying. Are you expecting me to believe that somehow it's better that the men didn't cry or that they can't help each other physically? Like, do people not see? And I get it. People might think, oh, that's a trap that men made for themselves. And that is not true. We were born into this bullshit. We were, in my opinion, we were raised with these sorts of expectations. I understand how fathers have helped perpetuate that, but they learned it down the road. But I do believe that it only helps one set of MFers to have men kind of like not be able to be in touch with their humanity, because that's what that is to me. It is human to cry. It is human to touch.
Yeah.
Men are being stripped from your humanity. We can talk about it in terms of AI and shit like that, but for a deep down way, it's not just data collection and AI that's stripping our humanity. We have learned certain codes and certain cultural norms and male cultural norms that I think have stripped men of their humanity, and I think it's a problem.
Absolutely, and it's important that I'm glad you brought it up because um, human touch is the most powerful superpower you can have as a human connection. We see that being done with children. Although, we try to accept the new norms or new societal systems in place from a school setting that will say, well, they have to self-soothe, right? Like a 4-year-old. But, I think when we help people as a young age co-regulate and to have a coping mechanism, how to overcome these challenges as a child, whatever those healthy struggles are, I think both boys and girls are going to have a great effect and impact when you have that. But the problem is once you start hitting a certain age and you start to grow up, there are these, societal expectations that you can't do that no more. And there is a big huge difference. I work in a school, and in my line of work, there is a lot of more dominant females working in schools, and you could tell the difference between how boys are treated than how girls are treated as young as 4 years old or 7 years old, even 10 years old. And that goes along with expectations. I mean, I was also seeing um, how these school systems are not really, I my personal opinion, are not really meant for both boys and girls, but especially I do think more so for boys, just because boys naturally have more energy. They're going to be more jumpity. They're going to have all these movements that a lot of these psychologists or a lot of these so-called professionals are going to diagnose or misdiagnose these boys and are going to be, putting them in as a category and say, this kid has ADHD, and then, shoot them up with a bunch of injections or pills to calm them down. And so yeah, I do think that this is a big, huge problem, and we need to start talking about it more.
I think a school setting is not the proper place to observe how boys and girls behave 100%. Because, Jonathan, if you remember, um, I know you studied under Nina Mogar as well, someone who is she was a child developmentalist at well-known different universities, and I suggested you study with her. She always said the school setting, which is as we have also stated here, what's left is not meant to learn and a place to grow. It's a place to train kids to be workers. So I don't think it's also a good place for us to observe boys and girls. I think girls we don't know what's happening at home, the expectations that are held higher on girls that are training them to be submissive or to train them to be so when you say that boys and girls have differences, I don't know if the school is a best place to observe that, because you see girls already conditioned um, to be taking care of their siblings or to hold more responsibilities, and therefore trained to be more uh, obedient. But I do believe there are biological differences, and I'd like to see how those things are played out. And I'm not going to discuss that further here right now. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds of like how do we determine the biological differences between boys and girls, because I think that's a very important subject. I do believe there are biological differences. Uh, I wanted to mostly acknowledge that the fact that yes, in schools there are human interactions that condition boys to act differently. So I know that happens in our society. Uh, so in as far as how boys are treated differently, yeah, it does happen. Hmm.
Yeah, I also cannot speak to how much I understand the biological basis for why men might be like this versus women be like this. All I know is that based on my own upbringing, I felt very trained not to cry, trained not to touch. And I do think like the basis, like I really like that you said touch is one of the most powerful things. And it's interesting to me that we as men are trained not to touch one another. Um, there are there are places we can do that: wrestling, sports, like grappling, like where it can be very intimate. It's not sexual, or it's not overtly sexual, but but one of the things one of the reasons I like wrestling so much is, I think, a virtue of that, part of just touching and breaking through that barrier, because you were wrestling with in practice and things like that with another guy all the time, and um, and I believe that men are trained, and homophobia is part of that training, to basically say you can't do that, because I don't think it's natural for men to be that afraid of each other physically, and not afraid in terms of somebody's going to beat me up, but like to like a sense that if I have a friend, I see women just they touch each other. It actually that seems human to me. That doesn't just seem like a female thing to me. That seems human, and I feel that I was untrained of that humanity to possibly have that same interaction with with a male. And I can tell you that in wrestling, particularly when I was wrestling with friends who you train with regular, you just go up. Like if you look at a wrestling practice, you will see guys just go and like grab each other, not even start to wrestle, but like almost like hug and things like that, because we've already broken down that physical barrier. And so it happens in practice. So that that kind of just that alone, not crying, not touching, represents something that is going to mess somebody's mental health up. And there are other pressures that Jonathan kind of mentioned, of like being a provider and being expected to stand on your own 2 feet, that are other parts, but that are also a problem. But I think if you just take out the idea that men should not cry, men don't touch each other, I think you've already fucked men up in terms of your humanity. And so it's a wrap right there. And I don't think that the absence of touching is biological. I don't think men's biology, XY chromosome, whatever thing you want to say, having a penis would then basically make it that they shouldn't touch each other. Like that, I don't think that.
Yeah, I would agree, because this is the whole reason why, as a father myself, I, with my son and I, we have this connection through touching. And I want to be very clear, because I don't want someone viewer to be like, "Oh, what do you
Yeah.
mean you child?" Right? Always,
But
stating that
and
direction.
sorry, Jonathan, but just the very fact that you have to defend
Exactly.
that
That's my
is
point.
is just and I get it, you should, but the fact that you have to is the problem itself. I'm sorry.
Right.
So go ahead.
No, that's exactly my point. Um, and so, I have always had, I never knew how to be a father. I never knew how to be touched by a father. I myself, when I the little time that my dad has made a connection through touching with me, always felt weird to me. One, because he obviously was not in the picture so often, but also the fact that this other man, grown man, is touching me, and I was not used to that. And I wanted to break that as soon as I became a father, to learn what is it that men are doing right now that I don't want to be part of.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when people, men, don't even say, I love you to their own boys, but then they probably will say it with their daughters.
Right.
And so, I try to always, share those experiences with my son, as young as he was, to, be on my chest whenever he would take a nap, or, to, hug me, or that I would hug him, and that I would, kiss him in his cheek. We would rub each other in the nose. These are forms of connections that I've tried to break, that you don't really see commonly with a lot of men with their young boys. Even till today, my son is 10 years old. We still have that same sort of connection. But I know that there's going to be a point where my son may feel that there is an expectation or some sort of peer pressure not to be doing these things. And, of course, you're always going to have these sort of teenage life that whether you're a girl or a boy, you're not going to want your parents to be at the prom or be a volunteer or whatever. Those are going to be normal, right? But I think that my son, maybe at some point, who knows, hopefully not, and I'll teach him that. But hopefully, he doesn't become like one of these young men that may feel and not want to say, "Hey, Dad, I love you," or whatever. I think it's important to have these breaking these norms that traditional males may feel and stuff. But yeah, it's something that it's an interesting topic and an interesting factors that play in a huge role.
Yeah, I mean, like even the words "I love you," you might a male might be able to say that with their mom. They
Mhm.
might be allowed to say it with their dad. I think they are allowed to say it with their son, but I hear what you're saying in terms of like that there's even almost a stigma there. But what about what about your friends? Can you say
Mhm.
"I love you" to your friends? You might be able to say it to your female friends, and then you have to clarify, but it's not in that way, like. And
Mhm.
then with your male friends, like I've seen in middle school, "I like you, no homo," right? They
Yep.
go like, right, that you have to do that thing, and it's like, what is that?
Mhm.
That's like such a mind fuck, to basically make it so that people are. It is such a disconnection, um, and there shouldn't be any caveats to it. I can tell you I like you, but I can tell you I love you, right? Like if I like you, I might not love you. Yeah, I like you, and I don't have to say anything. That's just a positive. Um, and the it is so unfortunate and it's so damaging to men to be discouraged from saying those things. And if there's one emotion men are encouraged to go down, it is not their sadness, it's not their fear, because you can't be afraid. It is their anger, right?
Mhm.
They're
Mhm.
allowed to be angry. And that's the one avenue we'll allow. But then that sometimes finds that for fathers, they only know how to, some of their stuff only comes out in anger. And so some of that touching becomes hitting.
Mhm.
And then that in itself builds a kind of poison
Yeah.
into the intimacy that can come from touching that's not hitting, And so uh, men look, women face a real trial in capitalist society, but I personally feel men face a different but deep trial in capitalist society that is bad, like that is onerous on them, and that makes them less human, less capable of forming real relationships, more alone, and ultimately serves only our rulers. Um, but I think this is why I was glad to have this conversation, because I feel like this has to be penetrated. It's not about saying that our problems are the worst problems, but it is about saying that there is a real set of problems being encouraged and propagated in the world of men that is creating a problem for us. And I think there's some things we can undo, but I I think a lot of it is just systemic. Like I do think that society is encouraging us to play these particular roles, and I don't think it's just biology that turn out to make us more isolated, more alone, more frustrated, and then less capable of building real connections with other people. And I don't see how that serves us. I do see how that serves people who are trying to get over on us.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. You reminded me when I remember I had to talk with a friend of mine in eighth grade here in Aptos Middle School, and I remember asking him, "Hey, what's your number?" And at that time, I didn't even use things like "no homo," but I just asked him for his number, and he said to me, "What you want my number for? Am I ain't no bitch, right?" So
Right.
it's stuff like that that I remember, oh, I have to be careful how I get in contact with this guy because I don't want people to feel like I want their numbers. And ever since then, throughout my teenage life, I just remember just feeling like I can't really ask them directly, openly to just get their number because you usually just do that with females. I have to just kind of figure out a different way, a way where I say something along the lines of, "Hey man, we should link up," or "Hey man,
Right.
you know, what's what are your digits?" Or what something around, not directly, right? And so yeah, it's and then you mentioned about behavior when it comes to anger. Very true. That's something that I actually talked to a couple of few friends of mine that we men we're emotional too. That's just part of human nature. But our emotions deliver by anger, right? Most of the time, I would say maybe 8 times out of 10 or 9 times out of 10. Whereas with women, they're gonna cry, they're going to be more sad or show more of that facial expression. Um, and you hear the phrase, men don't cry, bitches cry, right? And I heard that a lot when I was a teenager. And so I remember that it was something that I didn't agree, but you felt this pressure of not being that way.
Mhm.
I remember also having a hard time crying in front of my son. And I don't want to get whole into it because it's more complex than that. I'm not saying it's appropriate for a parent in general to cry in front of their kids, right? That's also not healthy. But
Right.
what I mean to say is when he had his therapist and I was going through a very hard time at that particular time with his mother, I just remember trying to always hold my tears and looking in this direction while my son was in the opposite direction of me. And I remember his therapist would tell me after our talk or our conversation we had in that session, he said, "Jonathan, don't feel like you have to escape. Don't feel like you have to not show your son that you can't cry." And I told him, I said, "Well, that's because I want him to know that Papi is strong
Mm.
in the sense of I'm gonna be able to help you and protect you, not in the sense of strong because masculine men have to be this way. No, it has to be. I have to be strong as a person, whether you're a woman or a man." But he later explained to me that, it was important for my son to see that
Mhm.
there are hard times. Yeah, we go through adversity, we go through challenges in our life. And it's important for him to see that you're not always going to be this superhuman, Superman, or you're not always going to be numb, or, because then how is he going to express his own emotions when he goes through something similar to an issue that you went through as an older adult? And that made a lot of sense to me. And every now and then, if I'm feeling overwhelmed or if I'm feeling really challenged, and I can't really keep it together, sometimes I will shed some tears and I will shed my emotions because I do want him to know, like, hey, us, man, it's fine, it's okay. Bobby, is going through a struggle, but I'll overcome this, and it's okay, and I want, my son to feel that way because there's times where I have seen him where he tries to hold in his tears. He certainly didn't get that from me, but
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure he learns it from just being maybe around his friends, or maybe a teacher telling him like, "Hey, don't cry," or whatever. Who knows, right? But these are things that we have to break through, and it's important to understand that this is a very serious problem, not to move on or anything, but to add to this conversation. It's these expectations that we have as men in relationships that we come across amongst our jobs, or even in a romantic relationship or a marriage, or whoever is your spouse. That in itself is also a huge big problem. And I know that men are obviously if they don't know how to express their emotions through crying or through other emotions other than anger, they will hit, right? They
Mhm.
will become violent.
Mhm.
And then what if we also add in the fact that there is also the opposite sex, where when men become abused, right, and they become the victim, no one really talks about that, right? Because most men do what? They become violent and they have this representation that, when we think about domestic violence, I'll tell you myself, I think of a man. I don't know about you guys, but I think of a man. And
Yeah.
I would say the majority of people will think of a man. And why not? I understand, the majority of men will do that. But there is this other space of area where there are men, and I can say for myself that I have experienced that mental abuse, right? That, emotional abuse, and also the physical abuse, right? And I remember when I went through these, challenges in life, I had a very hard time how to deal with it because I know that, in a court system, it's hard to prove myself that I am innocent, that I am a victim of domestic violence, and that, that particular person is the abuser. And I remember just kind of talking about it, amongst some circles of mine at that particular time. And I remember one of, he's not a friend, more of an acquaintance, but he was, saying, things like when I was expressing to him, I was kind of crying. I thought he was someone who could kind of like tell me, hey, everything's gonna be all right. But it was a total opposite. I remember he would say things like, you didn't hit her, did you? Oh, but did you start it though? Or, somewhere along the lines of, but you know what you did, for her to act that way. It's always on me. And it's like, what? This is a major problem that I see commonly. And there isn't that support, there isn't that help. And that's sexist, that's gonna be something that I don't know if you guys want to share, but I have a lot more, to say, but I'll leave it up to there.
First off, I want to go back to the crying thing, but then I'll come back to the the sexual part, and the inferences that abuse, if there's physical abuse in a relationship or sexual abuse in a relationship, it must be man against a woman. First off, like, when for me, I didn't cry for so many bad things that had happened to me. I did not cry about it. Like, and it wasn't until I started counseling that I realized how much I was holding on to crying. Like, the first time of crying in counseling was actually painful. Like, I almost hyperventilated. Like, it was hard to come out. And then later, years later, I would cry and it wouldn't be hyperventilating. It would just be tears. And I think we are taught as men that that's not strong to cry. But think about that. Like, I think about, you have that bridge behind you, and if that bridge doesn't shake in the wind, if it just holds itself stiff, that shit's going to crumble in the wind. If it doesn't give in some little way, it's not a strong bridge. And crying is an expression of, like, it's something normal that helps you process whatever you're going through. If you're told you can't do that, then you're like a bridge which can't vibrate. And a bridge has to vibrate in order to stand. Otherwise, it will collapse. And so I think even the definition, even the notion of strength that men are taught is inverted. And we are taught to be stronger by being less human and being less normal in some ways. The things you said about the sexual abuse, it reminds me of the Me Too movement. And I think the Me Too movement, well, it was important. It was important. Although I understand there's a political part of it, Democratic Party used all sorts of things in certain ways. But let's just get down to the notion of, if you're a woman who's experienced abuse from someone, and in this case, in the Me Too movement, it was about men, then it's a good thing to talk about that and to get that out. That is a good thing. Case closed. But the Me Too movement, did it also talk about the sexual abuse of women on women, or men on men, or women on men? All of those are part. All of people who've experienced that have a Me Too story. And it's interesting to me that the Me Too movement decided to say, no, we're not talking about all those other ones. We're just talking about these. And for that reason, that was another reason, not the primary reason, that I saw that movement was going to ultimately do more damage to people than it was going to help. Even though I think there are individuals who I think were helped by sharing their story. Politically, I think it was used to divide, and politically, I think it actually was used to strengthen some elements of the Democratic Party, which I don't want to get into too much. But a real Me Too movement would actually embrace all those elements of it. Wouldn't just pin it on one gender, and would say this is a problem we all face, and it has different facets, like sexual abuse, man to woman, is going to, while it's just as painful when it's woman to man, it's going to because of gender roles, it's going to manifest differently. It's going to have different problems in terms of the people talking about it. So I think that a real Me Too movement would have talked about all those things, and would have allowed space for all those to come in. And doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter which is like 70% versus which is 20% of the time, because it's all part of the human experience. Why can't it be talked about? And I actually think everyone would have learned more about this if it would have been discussed in that way. But in my opinion, Me Too was not really about liberating people. It was about controlling people at the end of the day, but that's a different story.
You mentioned at the very beginning of this episode about a lot of emphasis given to Pride Month. Pride Month originally was, as the legend goes, it's from the 1970s, where people there was a clash between police and members of the LGBT back in June of, I forget, 1970, 1969.
That's
I don't know.
Stonewall raid, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was the clash that there was between the police and members of the LGBT. And then the year after that, there was a march and a continuous, consistency over the years of showing people that you could be who you want to be, because there was a lot of oppression towards being gay, being lesbian, being a member of the LGBT. There's never really been an issue with being straight, if you look in history. So that's the reason there's no need to recognize it. But men's mental health began just in 1994. And so my question to you is, if it's so important and, a lot of emphasis has been given to Pride Month, then why haven't more men brought up the importance of men's mental health? I have my own ideas of why I think it is, but I'm asking you because you compared it and you're saying a lot of emphasis being given to Pride Month during June. But then the question maybe is on men, which we're all men here, but I'm asking you because you're the guest. Why do you think men have not placed the emphasis on men's mental health? And it was only started after 1994 in the USA. Maybe there should have been more emphasis on it by men.
I mean, I honestly, I have some ideas. I mean, I think that, a lot of men don't report. If I'm not mistaken, I think I read a statistic where men don't actually report a lot of their, mental health issues. And so comparing that to maybe other men who are probably from the LGBT community, are most likely to report it. I think that men, you know, um, have this sort of role and place in society where there's a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations, where I think a lot of men don't feel like, I don't think it's necessary, but I think it's important to, promote it. I think it's important to discuss it. Maybe there's more opportunities for men to actually come forward and speak on it. But if we look into the public spaces, I don't really see anyone trying to promote, the men's mental health. And so that to me in itself doesn't help in support. You brought up, Pride Month, that, obviously there was something going on in the 70s. And just like in any month that is celebrated with, a community, challenge or a community issue, I think once you start discussing it and you start promoting it, I think people are willing to have more conversations and be more open about it. But those are my ideas. That's what I think. I think there should be more, more discussions about it. I mean, little things matter, little things count. So, for example, if we're looking at Mother's Day, right? If we celebrate Mother's Day, it's during the school year, but Father's Day is once you hit, June. And is it really being celebrated as Mother's Day? I don't think so. There isn't anything that I've, in my time working for different school districts, I haven't really seen being promoted as much as, Father's Day, right? And when you look at Father's Day commercials, when you look at, men's commercials, it's the typical, right? We expect you to work, we expect you to, have these certain roles from men. When you look at, Mother's Day, it's about comfort. It's about, helping and supporting, your wife. And if you don't support your wife, you're an asshole. So I think that, how the media plays into it is a very important factor as to why, I think us men that don't step forward and discuss it. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I want to add on to that because um, I think if there were, frankly, I think if a men's movement started, progressives would call it right wing. They would basically say this is a right wing male, and that's we've had these movements where men have gone into the woods and things like that, and like tried to find themselves spiritually. And generally, progressives talk about that stuff as right wing stuff, as if it's a group of men trying to build themselves up as this violent cult. And so that's one thing. Secondly, men are encouraged to not identify this as a problem. You got to man up. That's the whole point of that term, which is that to say that there isn't a problem for you. You're a guy. You don't have any problems. That in of itself, the training that is done to men is a problem. And even the notion, the fact that straight is all good. Oh, it's all good, straight. No, it's not all good straight. Do you know how fucked up heterosexual relationships are? And they are for women, but they're also for men in terms of what's expected of them. Oh, I'm the person who's supposed to be the aggressor sexually. If I'm not, there's a problem. Oh, I'm the person who's supposed to want to have sex. If I'm not, there's a problem. If my wife wants to have sex more than then there's a problem for her. Oh, I'm the person who has to provide in the family financially. Oh, if I'm not, there's a problem. Are you kidding me? Straight? It's all good? No, it's not all good. It is not talked about, and I wonder who benefits from that. Like so, and I think your questions are very good, Eduardo. I just think we've almost narrowed things down to the point where men have got it all good. Fine, stop talking. Heterosexual relationships all good. Fine, stop talking. I would say this. I'm starting to think anytime there's an area where people kind of think, oh, let's not talk about it, there's probably a reason we're being asked not to talk about it. And even to think that there's no conversation to be had. Because I'll bet if you look more deeply in that thing that we don't have to talk about, there's a whole mess of things that would uncork from that. I'm not saying it solves all society's problems, but I tend to think that those things that are almost forbidden, that are said, oh, that's good, are probably areas where there's major problems that the system is getting over.
Right. I want us to be clear, like there isn't, I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about it. What I'm saying is in the beginning of the episode, when we start comparing, that's what I had the issue with. If we start comparing Pride Month with men's mental health, why is it more emphasis? That we should just say there's this emphasis on men's mental health, and I'd like to discuss that. That's what I think that's the reason why I think we're having this discussion, that I think it's important. But the minute we start comparing oppressions, which is what I have a issue with, because it's like saying there's a lot of emphasis on deaf people, but I don't see there's emphasis on blind people. And the minute we start doing that as working class folk, as people, like this is one oppression and that's another oppression. There are different oppressions that are happening, and they're under the same, let's say, for lack of a better term, for conventional sake, under the umbrella of the disability. folk or people who are differently abled. But when we start saying, why is there a lot of emphasis this month on deaf people and not a lot of emphasis on blind people? That's the minute I think we start saying one is being oppressed more than the other. And so I have a strong issue with that. And I don't want us to start comparing oppressions, because that's exactly what I think, people at the top want us to do. They want us to separate ourselves from one another. These are not the same as well. Blind people and deaf people aren't the same. They experience different things. So they have different areas that things that they're confronting. So when I brought up men, I'm not saying, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying that men don't have issues that they are confronting, that are challenging. I'm saying is the minute we start separating, saying, a lot of emphasis on giving Pride Month, the Pride Month is irrelevant. Let's focus on the fact that we have a lot of issues in our society as men. The other thing too is, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah. Well, I just want to be clear, because the reason why I said that in the very beginning is because it's not to say that Pride Month people shouldn't celebrate it. I'm saying that I, as a person, when I think of Men's Mental Health Month, and it's being recognized since 1994, like you said, in the month of June, it's not as promoted like it is with Pride Month. And so why is that, right? Isn't it an issue, part of, that we have to recognize? You see a bunch of these companies and you see a bunch of people recognizing, Pride Month, which that's fine. But it's not recognized. Men's mental health is not as recognized as it is in Pride Month. And it's not, for me, like, having 1 month is not enough. For me, the issues are every day. Pride Month, same thing. The issues are every day, right? Why are we just discussing it just 1 month? We should be discussing it every day. So for me, it's important to bring it up, because people, like, I mean, Andy, you said you didn't even know prior to talking about it with Eduardo about Men's Mental Health Month. I didn't know until maybe 2 years ago, but I
Yeah.
knew that it's a mental health crisis amongst us men. So it's those are the things, I think, the reason why, um, I would say that these are the ideas that I suspect that why men don't discuss it, they don't talk about it, and it's not as promoted.
Yeah, I think that the original, it's like Martin Luther King, right? Like,
Mhm.
he had so many radical ways of being, and that are not discussed, that even sometimes, or even Malcolm X, that are known during February, Black History Month. And I agree, by the way, I'm not fond of these thematic months, but uh, when you do a lot of I think it's whitewashing, Andy, if that's the word, or not whitewash, or like when you start putting makeup on a certain idol, or you start making it, when you start changing the way that it was originally supposed to be seen, I think that that's benefit for a greater cause. Which, for example, it's easier to talk about Malcolm X being a champion for civil rights than it is for him talking about uh, the need to protect yourself at all costs, even if it is through violence, because that's easier to share and teach in elementary school, middle school, and to train students to be pacifists instead of being revolutionary. And so I think that Pride Month has also been whitewashed, or pinkwashed, another way to say it. But the original, like, protests and the uprising, the conflict between the police constantly abusing and taking down just a small little gay bar in New York, where people were minding their own fucking business, and saying the police always messing and messing and messing until they fought back. That is the revolutionary act of the LGBT movement fighting back. And then slowly you have it uh, being marches and protests, because LGBT members were not able to be themselves. And then suddenly you have it being opted, just like the Black Lives Matter movement, opted by the Democrats or opted by the liberal left, and then they're then transforming it. So I just want to be clear, like, it's not the LGBT movement necessarily, it's rather the political class that is trying to transform something for their own gains, you know, to convince people that this is why we should be doing it this way. To convince people that we can make this into a political movement, but in order to feed into the system and not necessarily to make any revolutionary acts. We don't want revolution. We don't want LGBT folks to rise up. We want them to be trained, conditioned, and companies taking over, companies like Target and everything that you've mentioned before. We want them to, companies just to make Pride Month a Disney World, you know? So that's what I'm concerned about, like just the bringing up of Pride Month. And it's like, as a comparison. But I understand. I understand. I'm not blind to the fact that you're mentioning that there isn't an emphasis as well to men's mental health month. And which is also problematic for me because I just, like I said, I don't really like the fact that we're designating areas of or people's struggles to months, you know?
Right.
And the other thing too is, you know, I want to touch on two things, Jonathan, that you mentioned.
Can I say something about
go ahead.
designation?
Yeah.
So, look, that it might have started with the month, but
yeah,
even in this discussion we've seen how men not touching each other intersects with homophobia, right? Or we've seen, like, well, I'm not going to say we. I'm going to speak for myself. I believe there's an intersection of me being raised as a guy who should not touch other guys with homophobia in society. Somebody could tell me that homophobia has helped me, but I don't think it has. It has made me less in touch with myself. I don't think that, and me being more, and a society which doesn't have homophobia makes it more likely that I can touch other guys without being stigmatized. All right, and that would be a good thing. Secondly, the role that men are urged to play as being the provider, being the person who bears up under the weight and things like that, that to me is very much connected to sexism, connected to the expectation of that happens on another side of women. So I don't see, I mean, and look, we can have Women's Month, we can have, but, and yes, there's something okay about that. I mean, I think it's fine, but I think in terms of the way I think about these things is I see how they intersect and interweave. I guess but I think people could talk about a women's rights movement as revolutionary. People might talk about a gay rights movement as revolutionary, but I propose that people would hear about a men's rights movement as reactionary. That's mostly what the left would say. Revolutionary gays fighting for each other, for their stuff. But if we tried to have the kind of real movement for men, now I don't think revolution can just come from gay people or women or men. I think it actually is going to require all of us. But the reason I wanted to have this conversation is I know the left doesn't want to touch men issues with a 10-foot pole because they think men's issues are right-wing issues. And so that's one of the reasons why it hasn't taken the form that is a historically left expression that is, you know, demonstrations, blah, 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 because the left would say, fuck you, men, you don't have a movement to make. And if you did, it wouldn't be revolutionary, it would be reactionary. And I'd reject that. I actually believe it would be revolutionary for men to say, I can touch other men. And it doesn't have to, or it could be, or it doesn't have to, whatever, to break down all these barriers that Jonathan and I and you, Eduardo, have just talked about. There's something revolutionary in that. That's not going to make the revolution, but there is something revolutionary and say, why am I forced to stay within this box? And that did animate the Stonewall movement, which is you can't keep us in this box. We're breaking out. And so I agree with you that it's not going to be that helpful to figure out which month do we get to have this movement about, because we only get 12 months and there's more than 12 bad things going on in the world. But I can, like, in all the years we've done What's Left, we have not talked about this. And I actually maybe have been a little nervous to talk about it until Jonathan said, let's talk about it. And I was like, well, let's do it. And Well, leftists or liberals are going to make what they want of this. They might even say, well, Andy's gone off as right. He's become an official right winger now because he's saying this. Oh, well, I just happen to agree that men face their own crisis in a capitalist society that has some intersection with what women face or gays face, but also has its own part. The fact that it's different doesn't mean it's just mine and you can't understand. It just means they're dividing and conquering again. That's what it means to me.
Yeah, Jonathan, I was gonna say, Andy, it would be, it is almost taboo to talk about, but the thing is that we're missing the fact that, like, maybe here's how the thing is. If we look back at what the importance of why people have brought up the LGBT movement, for example, that we have been discussing, it's because the oppression that existed. So if we just stopped attacking other members of different parts of the working class and we just not focused on those differences, then we would not have Pride Month and we would not have those issues. But who has historically oppressed the LGBT members of that community? It has been, I would say, the religion institutions, the government, and culturally in being influenced by those institutions, straight men. So if we stop doing things like that, then we would not have people coming out and trying to fight for their rights. And I'm putting that in quotes because I think that common law or just people should have natural rights because you exist. And so therefore you should just exist and carry on with your life. And, I wanted to discuss, I wanted to point out, I want to touch on 2 points that you mentioned, Jonathan. You talked about crying. Crying is a exterior manifestation, right? Like it's what you see. But crying is a symptom of what's happening inside. And I think men and women feel a lot of emotions because we're human. We just manifest it on the outside differently. Some of it biological, other it conditional training because of our society. But the emotions that we feel are still inside. And I don't think that I think there are biological differences between men and women, yes. But I don't think they're that strong or that they're that different from us as humans to the fact that we do feel things inside. And I think that is at a deeper level what we have to look at. And mental health is important because of our ignorance, neglect, and apathy about what we feel as human beings. And so I wanted to say that I hope that as a society we move forward with the way that we perceive or we deal with mental health, and we acknowledge people's emotions and the way that people feel. And that's something I want, because just as you mentioned that men suck it up, and I was looking at the statistics because I also listened to the podcast that you had last night with Jacob. Gay men and straight men experience domestic violence, and they don't express it, they don't share it. And statistically, actually, gay men report domestic violence lower than straight men. So we're on the same boat. And I say we because I don't identify as gay necessarily. People have heard. I identify as someone that has been in gay relationships and has also been in heterosexual relationships. And here's the area that I think that we're losing is that, I was looking at Men's Mental Health Month, and there's nothing that I was looking at that said straight men or gay men. It said men's mental health. And the fact that a lot of straight men separate gay men, I think, and even gay men separate straight men, is hurts the cause of men living as one, solidarity. Because, like I mentioned, straight men don't report domestic violence, and gay men don't report uh, domestic violence. So why is that? Because we're obviously sharing the same thing. We're not that different as people try to make it out to seem. We may have different experiences, but I think they're sometimes, but I think they're nuanced. They're nuanced, meaning that like they're not that different. I know, for example, that that when I'm on public transport, I know, for example, that women will react differently to a straight man versus a, a gay man because of their fear of what could happen to them on public transport. I get that. And so those are the nuanced differences where I think that sometimes straight men will come off more intimidating, more menacing. And then, as the expression in Spanish goes, por uno los pagas todos. Por uno los pagas todos. For one, everyone pays. For one guy, that everyone else pays the price for that one person who did something to them, right? So I don't want to also ignore the fact that there are slight differences that happen between these two groups. But in general, I think that I'd like to see the solidarity between men, straight men and gay men. I was in a music festival 2015 in 2015 in England, and I was invited to a men's workshop in a dome, and it was an invitation for all men. And I honestly thought it was just for straight men. And when I asked and inquired, the leader of the group, one of the leaders, said to me, "No, it's for just men. Anyone, whether you're gay or straight." And it was the first time I think I really felt the connection between my brothers, uh, the real connection between straight and gay men, because I I was bullied and taught not to feel connected to straight men. That was I was told I was a faggot. I was told I was not a man enough. And suddenly here I am in a space among straight and gay men. I think mostly it was straight men, and I was embraced, and we did a lot of exercises that were it felt very caveman like exercises. But the fact that it was a brotherhood where I was accepted really gave me more of a connection with my members of my gender. And I think that that's what I'm trying to get at. It's when I began feeling that there's this connection, that I began that there is when there was the genesis of solidarity began with knowing that we are in this together, you know. And I think looking at, I was telling, we had a conversation, Jonathan, and I on the phone, and I said to you that I think that we're losing a lot of that connection between men in general because there is a division, and I hear it culturally. Straight men saying you're not man enough, so you don't belong part of this group. And I think a lot of gay boys that look up to me, that I have a community with, adolescents, don't feel connected to their fathers or to their men because society tells them that they are not man enough. And so I think there's an issue there. I think that there is a real deep divide where we are not looking at us as members of the same community. There's a lot that I said this, so you all can respond to that.
Yeah. Well, I think what I got and what I understood is that you would like to see more solidarity. You see a division, and that probably is a part the the way it is. Maybe I am thinking a lot about what both of you all said, and I asked myself, if I was in a table with another man, but he happens to be homosexual, would I have a connection with that person? Maybe, you know. Maybe not. I really don't know. What I do know is um, there could be some connection maybe through music or some other areas that, are interests and hobbies, but maybe when it comes to, like, for example, and I'll speak on this, when it comes to like being in a romantic relationship, I don't have those experiences. I don't have the same experiences as another homosexual man. And the type of issues that I face with women is going to be totally different from a homosexual man with their man. And so, although there can be some relatable issues, maybe, I don't know, maybe I can probably think of something as I'm exploring this with you guys. Maybe there's a possibility where that person may feel that, my dad never said I love you to me, and maybe I have that same experience. I just think that there is differences. I'm glad you pointed out some things because, yeah, when women see me, right, it's a total different, approach. I can see it. I can tell. When I walked into that meeting, of my son, I was caught in intimidation, right? When they see you, it's different. It's like, oh, Edward, he's back. Um, and it's these sort of challenges that we're gonna face. I know that girls, women are going to maybe not share as much with me, or even in the family. Even in the family, um, I'm pretty sure, like, if I were to have a cousin who's a woman, we wouldn't be touching each other the way how you touch a cousin who is a woman. There are differences. Um,
My interactions with women is a lot easier because they perceive me as being a homosexual man that is not threatening versus a heterosexual man. If you were to be affectionate towards your relatives, yeah.
yeah, in general, right? Like, I'm not pointing out you specifically, but
No,
I
no,
have,
I think it's just for our audience. I'm just trying to be clear.
right, right, right. I have seen it happen. Um, I think, the fact that there are, gay men who tend to be more feminine are going to be more accepted by women because they tend to be more feminine, right? Women are feminine. Whereas a straight male like myself who comes along, um, I know that I've experienced places, for example, where women thought I was hitting on them, or when I go as a father and I go to these parks when my son was a very young age and trying to make connections, trying to have play dates, and most women would be are nannies and their mothers, and I try to find that connection. They have a certain type of way me getting their numbers because they think that I'm going to try to hit on them. These are the experiences that I don't think gay men are experiencing. And I'm not saying as a whole, probably, right? But I think that we just have differences. But can we have solidarity? Yeah, I think it's always possible to have solidarity to figure out what gay men are going through and what straight males are going through. And in the same way, I see cultures who want to have these community members, community leaderships. You have people who are trying to help their community. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but for example, I know a black guy who talks with his community, right, up in Hunters Point, is going to be discussing and trying to get the people from his community to try to understand what he's trying to motivate them to do to set goals for themselves and accomplish things. If I come along and I try to, do the same response, and I try to, get these community members to do the same, I don't think it'll be the same result. I don't think I'll get the same outcome. As opposed to if I go to the Mission District and I talk to the Latino community, it's gonna actually have a different result, a different response. are we saying that we can't be in solidarity? Yeah, there's a black and brown movement that happened years ago, and there is always that try to have solidarity. But I think ultimately, how you get your community going is if they see you as a person that looks like them or that have the same similar experiences as them. And I think that's something that I focus on more, but I'm also open to having solidarity and seeing where that takes me, and we can explore that.
Yeah. I think I understand when you say that men can be perceived more intimidating. I know that Andy and I have had conversations where, if you don't mind me, Andy, you can edit this part out.
No, go ahead.
Where people, especially female teachers, have accused Andy of being aggressive in his political aims at his former school site, because Andy shared emails with me where he was perceived as a white male imposing his political goals. And so I get the part with being intimidating. I'm not sure, Jonathan, if it's always just because you're a man. I think it's also if you speak up. So there's a part where, yes, it's because you're a man, but it's also because you speak up. And yeah, I've been called intimidating myself. People been said that I'm intimidating, and they didn't care that if they perceive me as gay. They don't really care about that. They call me intimidating. No, I think that,
and I can personally say that sometimes, Eduardo, you are intimidating.
People.
No, I can't. And it's a good thing.
People do consider me to be intimidating.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I don't want to. So I think I just want to make sure that Jonathan, that we are, we're on the same page about the fact that already you walking in as a man, you already, especially perceived as a heterosexual man, you're going to get more stereotypes than maybe someone who is maybe wearing mascara and a man with some rainbows in their hair, whatever. Maybe there might be a little bit less intimidation because maybe they're perceived maybe as a Disney character. I get that, where I think that you lose me is that I think that you think that the areas where you said people think that you're hitting on them, like being flirtatious, right? Perceived as a pervert, basically, because you're a man, and if you are, I think the affection between family, I think those areas, for example, me, I share that with you because if you ask for the number of a mother, people think that you're hitting on them. You're right. People might think that. But that happens as well with me, when so many times I've asked a father for their number, and people think that I'm hitting on them. So I think that if we just take off gender, that happens to me too. Perceived as being a perverted, like you can't take out your niece that easily as a heterosexual man is the same thing as what happens to me when I can't take out my nephews independently, because they'll think that what's my interest in taking out my nephews? Why do people wondered, why do I take out my nephew? Why is he so interested in his nephew? Maybe he wants something with his nephew, So those are the things that I'm also experiencing. And the affection between family members, you're right. Maybe you and I can't be as affectionate with your cousins, but that applies the same thing with me. When I start touching my cousin Brian, or when I start hugging my cousin Yetsan, people perceived it differently. So I think those areas are not different from us. It's just the gender changes.
Can I add a story to that? Because remember, Eduardo, you and I did a story on Uncle Aaron, my uncle who passed.
Yeah.
Gay man. He was a grandfather, and he loved his grandson very much, and was like, would take care of the grandson. The parent wasn't so comfortable, with the grandfather talking about his homosexuality. And my grandfather was like, he would go to a men's, it was this thing to unite black and white. They were all gay, but it was like, how to unite black and white, because they identified a racial division in the gay community that they wanted to heal. And when the parent found out that he had brought the son to that event, not just because he was with the son and he was going to that event, that was the end of him seeing the son, grandson. That was it. Like for years, couldn't see him. And I do think that's not to dismiss, or it's just to say that these divisions are very pernicious. They take a personal impact, but they are extremely pernicious. And I do think we are trying not to talk about men's issues as just one more division, but just another area that does need to be acknowledged that all people should know about. Because frankly, I think the more you know about how men feel, the easier it is to understand the impact of sexism, because sexism plays a role in the fact that you, as a parent trying to relate to another female parent, because of how men have been trained to deal with women in a sexist society, men, you don't get your feelings, but you act as a almost predator on other women, means that we can't really deal with each other. Like, it makes it harder for us to come together and unite, not just even around politics, but unite around parenting, which is like, that's a wonderful thing if people are trying to do. But you can see like how they've built all these divisions. And Eduardo and I have talked about, it's not just, brotherhood we're trying to build or sisterhood, but even nationhood. The idea that once you cross that border, fuck you. If you're on the other side of that thing and you're trying to come in here, get the fuck out. Like, who is served by that? It's like all these divisions operate in different ways, but they produce the same outcome. All of us being divided, all of us trying to break down divisions are not able to because of distrust. And there's a basis to that distrust. So there is a basis for, it's not like women are making it out of making things up when they're like a little bit nervous about a guy who comes up to them. And most parents, if they have daughters, in some ways will train their daughter to be suspicious of men in one way, shape, or form. And I get it, but all that stuff plays in a way ultimately of making it impossible for us to really come together as humans, I would say as workers, and to deal with the people who benefit from those divisions. Oh, and last thing, I know, Jonathan, you said that you think that, and I don't think this is a big point, but I just want to say, I will say that personally, I'm not sure I see there's that much differences as in a heterosexual relationship than I would in a homosexual relationship between men and men or women and women. I'm not sure I know, but I'm not, like, I'm trying to think about it. The more I think about it, I feel like those relationships have more in common than they have difference. But I can't prove that. I'm just saying that's where I come from.
The reason why I could speak to that is because that I have dated both women and men, and I could tell you, Jonathan, from firsthand experience. I mean, I assume that both of you have not dated men, so therefore I could tell you that my relationships with men and women have been similar. There are sometimes slight differences, but those are very minimal. The core challenges of being in a relationship, such as communication, the presence of being, like all the challenges I have faced it with my 2-year relationship with a woman that I had, my year relationship with another woman that I've had, my 1-year relationship or less than a year relationship with another guy that I had, and then my long-term relationship with another guy. So there are these core challenges that I think that I have found that are similar, and I just don't think they are that different. Again, not saying that there aren't, they're just very minimal.
Okay. Not really, don't really know what to respond to that. I think I just have a different point of view. I think I have a different point of view.
Does your point of view come from have you dated men? Is that the point of view you're coming from?
I'm interested and focused on helping Men's Mental Health Month get it out there. If there's men from either from the LGBT or straight males that like to discuss it, like, I'm open to that. You know what I mean? I just see the difference. There's a difference, and I think if we were to bring more straight males into the conversation, I think we would have definitely, more experiences and more, storytelling to share and talk about. And it's interesting that, Eduardo, you bring up that, you've dated both men and women. Um, but then yourself that, when there's an expectation, for example, for men to pay for everything, I don't know that expectation from, the both
Yeah,
men,
I
right?
did say that. That's why I said there are differences, but
Right.
I don't think that that's why I remember when I said the core challenges of a relationship are there. Yes, though, and I don't want to dismiss it. This percentage is low of
Yeah.
if we were to measure it by percentages, but you're right. Like I have also shared that with you offline that those are some of the challenges I have faced in the past. Where
The other challenges as well is if you are in a homosexual relationship and you both get into it, how are you both going to receive um, a record and thrown in jail? If I hit a woman, there's a big, huge difference as opposed to two men getting into it together, even if they're gay, right? So that's what I mean when I talk about there's a difference. If a lot of
the
men
sexism.
have, right? If a lot of men take it and they're getting slapped and they're getting hit and they're getting punched, exactly like you said, you got to take it, right? But I don't know if a man with another man is going to take it. It's the same strength. People are going to argue it's the same strength. Maybe there's a height difference or whatever, but two men together are going to go at it.
Well, I don't know if it's the
I don't
same
think people
strength,
I don't think
but
people look at it like, well, it's a big issue or whatever. But when we talk about man versus women and the conversation that, we all see that sometimes go viral, like, oh, would you hit a man? I mean, would you hit a woman? Or, do you think we need to depend on men? And you see these women that say, no, we don't need to do that. Or you see these women that say, a man should never hit on a woman just because that's foul with no reason and not knowing why. So, these are the issues that I'm talking about. These are the issues that I've experienced that I'm
mhm.
sharing. And when we talk about that, yeah, we can talk about, well, that's that goes along with personality, if the person's bipolar, if the person has a different character and stuff. And I get that. I understand that. I also think that, um, some of these things that grow our mindset and our personal development. Like, I think that, maybe we should use different phrases, like instead of saying man up, right? Like grow up, right? Like really start to be mature about your shit, about your stuff. Both women and men, right? But you don't hear, women up, be a woman of your word. You don't really get that,
Yeah, I
issue.
want to be clear, Jonathan. The relationship challenges that I mentioned, I'll be specific: communication, sexual frustration, the need to mutually support one another. Like that the relationship challenges I have found are not different. The sexist, cultural, and institutional challenges onto a relationship are unique to a heterosexual relationship, and I give you that. Yes, because you're right. When a man and a woman have domestic violence and police come in, they'll automatically believe a woman than a man. That's the institutional challenge that they face. That's the sexist institutional challenge that they face. Yes, and when you speak about as well uh, regarding who has to pay, because I have experienced that as well, needing to feel like I have to pay because I'm a man when I'm dating a woman. Yes, again, that is a sexist cultural influence that is being received. As far as relationship, like my challenges without the cultural and without the institutional, like those are not different. But I think what you're getting at is the imposition that our society places on our straight brothers, and that is valid as well. I don't want. I was just speaking to the fact that in relationship there are no differences that I have experienced that are so high that I find them not different. don't want to deny and ignore and neglect the fact that we do have institutions that we have to dismantle that are sexist, that are also homophobic, and that are making our boys feel like they have to do things that are different from other men or other women, or excuse me, from women, excuse me. And that I want to acknowledge that, and so I don't want to lose sight of that. Yes. So if you're speaking to those areas, then we're on the same page about that. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, and I would just say that, when you talk about a term like "man up,"
Mm-hmm.
that very term that you are rightly frustrated by is rooted in sexism against women. It is that term doesn't come as just independent of women being told, be in your place. Because when women are told to be in their place, then the man is told you've got to take that place, right? And just like we talked earlier, when I'm not supposed to cry or when I'm not supposed to touch other men, that forbiddenness is rooted in a homophobic society, which is trying to separate me from my gay brothers and sisters, essentially. And so I can't. I agree with it. I'll just say this in terms of relationships. Like, I do believe that, like, just like a black man and a white woman going out in the United States are going to face additional challenges than I would face in that kind of in a white heterosexual relationship. But I do believe that the core things that they have to deal with in their relationship are what the things that Eduardo talked about, which is communicating with each other, honesty, trust. I do see how society will come in here with all its nonsense and make more problems for them than I might have with me and Brandy, right? But the core things we have to deal with in a relationship, I do think are common, and I do think that's important because I think if I thought that it was a completely different relationship, then in some ways I'm falling into the trap of division that I don't think is warranted, and frankly, I just don't think it's true. So that's the reason, because, like, in some ways, I'd invite you to really think more about people who are gay, and really say to yourself, like, do you think that the core things you deal with in your day-to-day relationship with, and sometimes it can take the form of who hit who and the police coming in, but let's be honest, Jonathan, that's like one moment in a month or a year. But when we think about how we spend our day trying to work things out with our partners, I think the kinds of struggles that I go through with Brandy, that you go through with your partner, are fundamentally not that different than a gay man with another man or a woman with another woman, except for what some of those things Eduardo mentioned are like the institutional stuff that it's not minor, comes in, but it doesn't represent the core of trying to find love with another person. And I think that's important because at the end of the day, that commonality is a feature of the possibility of unity and the possibility of solidarity and the possibility of connection despite our differences. Because in my opinion, these divisions are not just coming from heaven. They are being forced on us through institutions that have benefited from making people think that they're all different. And so if we're going to change that, then we're going to have to challenge the notion of the level of that difference.
I think I get what you guys are saying, and I think there could be unity, but like you said, Andy, I mean earlier you mentioned that if I come into the Me Too movement, if I come into the LGBT movement, the question is, would they really accept me for who I am? The question is, are they going to put me like an Andrew Tate? The question is, are they really going to try to help? If I'm willing to help them, are they going to help me? Or are they going to say what you said earlier, you're fine, you're okay, you're good? So is there really going to be a solidarity coming from them? I don't really think so. Right?
There's a, go ahead.
No,
Yeah. So, and I just wanted to say, like, there could be some solidarity from individuals, and maybe I could be that individual, but I don't think progressive social circles on that side of the community are going to try to accept me for who I am, because again, it's like, well, maybe straight men, they're looked at as like we don't accept, you know, the LGBT, and that could be true, but not a lot of people do, right? But I don't know. I think that first we need to focus on these issues that occur like in our social circles and in our social movements, and then try to like unite as well. Um, but you know, again, I just don't see it happening. I just don't
That's
see it happening.
Can I
that's the
respond
fight we're
first,
trying
Eduardo?
to.
And
Go
then,
ahead.
okay.
Go ahead.
So first off, I actually completely agree with you, Jonathan. I wish I could say I thought you would be accepted or I would be accepted. By and large, you will not experience that, and that's a problem. I think you are right to point out that solidarity is not a one-way street; it's a two-way street. And so but that is a problem in our movement. That doesn't mean it's something I want to accept as like that's the way it's going to be. But I'll just say that like I agree with your frustration, and I will also say it's not just frustration. The reality is, in those movements, if you came forward and said, "What about me being a straight guy?" They're like, blow off. They're going to tell you, forget you, and that's a problem.
No, I was just gonna say, you know, I think, you know, I'd be interested in seeing, you know, how we can unite as people that really want to unite, really want to do something about it. Um, I think for me, I don't think I have it in me to divide. I don't think I'm interested in dividing. I just want to be clear. Like I don't think we should be dividing each other. Just like, you know, you have the blue and the red, right? You have the donkey and the elephant. You have, you know, there's always a division. Like I think that obviously you have to have a unit, just like a family unit. But I I don't know. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that in a while, right? I haven't seen that in a very long time, or from what I read from books, from our historic, you know, community challenges that we've had to face here in this nation. I mean, you know, I would like to see it, and maybe, you know, I like I said, I'd be open to it. I just don't see it happening, you know.
Well, that's I think one of the things we're trying to do here on what's left is you know, we're seeing those divisions, and we are that's why we are, I think we're the most frustrated group here, because we're trying to find solidarity class. uh, there is you know, back when we were part of mostly, I think, the left circles, Jonathan, back before 2020, mostly maybe me, and then being pushed out by progressive left circles. And then we try to support the freedom movement and become part of something larger, and mostly conservative people who consider themselves to be on the right, consider themselves to be part of the freedom movement. Suddenly immigration comes up, and they're not supporting the immigration. So like
They're not
we
supporting freedom,
freedom,
and
right,
they're supporting the state restricting all sorts of things that they just 2 years ago. Oh, don't let the state do this. So yeah,
right. So I think Andy and I and some members of this community on what's left have been pushed around like a ball from one place to another, and so it's been a challenge trying to find that solidarity with folk, and we're constantly working on it. But I think, Jonathan, the most important thing out of anything is not worrying about uh, what everyone else is doing. It's worrying about what we're doing as an individual, and that is what will spark uh, movement. If we just stick to the principles of what we're saying and consistent with our principles, and not being influenced like the majority of people who are being influenced by movements, picking football teams, then that's when we'll actually have a real class solidarity. But that's what I'm inviting everyone, and maybe you, everyone, to do. And that's why I focus on doing that. You mentioned you mentioned something about, like, you know, you maybe not have found um, gay connections with people who identify as gay. You know, I don't find actually a lot of connections with other gay men, as people might not be knowing that. I feel like I'm a dog that hangs out with cats. You know, I don't. I consider I like I have said I am. Well, actually, I feel like I'm more like a cat. I hang out with more with dogs. You know, it's like I I'm I'm in a same sex relationship, but I don't have gay friends. I don't have a lot of gay friends. I think it's one or two in my life, and I don't even think they're my friends. I think we just know each other through meeting on the street or in Colombia or some. I don't have friends. Uh,
You have some heterosexual friends.
I have more heterosexual male friends in my life. My best friend is straight. You know, most of my cousins are straight. My brother is straight. And my co-host is straight. And my two other co-hosts are male straights, Kenny and Michael. And
you love Jessica too, though.
And Jessica, a woman, she's straight. Everyone around my world is straight. So when you say that you're not sure if there will be those connections, I think that there's something there that we could look at, you know, where on a personal level you might want to look at it yourself, but anyone who says that, where you might think that there isn't a connection, there might be a barrier that makes you think that, might make you believe that. Because once we start bringing those labels down, you know, one time I had a friend say to me, I'll never forget this, Jonathan. He said, you know, I don't know if I have a lot of connection with the Mexicans. And I looked over at him and I said, I'm Mexican. So, you know, like, I think it's in his mind that he could not see he could have relationship with a Mexican, but he didn't realize he had a connection with me. You know, and so when you say that as well, Jonathan, I think about that friend who said that. So anyhow,
Yeah, well, there is a huge difference, right? I mean, you're not the typical gay guy. Let's just be real, right?
I
Like,
don't know. I've met a lot of gay men like David Campos and other folks that are really, like Andy has a lot of gay friends in his life,
yeah,
and I just think that we have to look at the barriers that we have. That's all I'm saying.
yeah,
Um,
I get it. I acknowledge the fact that, you know, there could be similarities and there could be, you know, topics that we can relate to in conversations. Um, I'm not someone who is proactively, you know, in a as a community activist or anything like that, you know, but it is something that, you know, I speak on and I have conversations on more of a personal level with friends who are straight when we talk about these things. I try to stay away from, I don't even know if it's considered independent media anymore because the independent media has evolved into mainstream media, if you think about
Correct.
it.
Yeah.
But, you know, YouTube, you know, channels that, you know, talk a lot about, you know, men and how, you know, there is differences between men and women. I try to stay away from that because although I do like some content, it's not something that, you know, it makes me believe on everything, but it makes me think about how people perceive the world. Um, I just I feel like, you know, forming a group and having solidarity, not having divisions. That's a tough, very tough challenge. I like I said, I don't see it happening. This kind of reminds me of, you know, when I used to believe in protesting. And although I do have a belief that, you know, you can make a difference, I don't think there's a real change in protesting. And I rather do something about it as opposed to just protesting. Whereas before, I would just, you know, go along and be part of that movement of protesting. But I think, you know, people have to create their own ways of how to get where they want, you know. And so I don't know. I just it's a topic that we can explore more and stuff. I know we're looking at the time and we all have to wrap up and stuff, but I do want to just say, I acknowledge, I understand what you guys are saying, and I recognize it, and it's an interesting, way of thinking.
The only challenge I think that I have found in that I is validating those small but key differences. I understand they're key. I don't want to undermine the fact that deaf people I'm a part of the community face other challenges than hearing people. I don't want to undermine the challenges that a straight man goes through than a queer man goes through. That a white man or a brown man. What I'm saying is that there are some key differences because of the society that we live in, and those differences have mostly can be either physical, exteriorly difficult, such as being deaf or blind, obviously, but they're also imposed on us to think that we're genetically different because of our sexual orientation or our skin color or our gender. And I'm just too afraid that the ruling class, the people at the top, have highlighted those differences that make us diverse, but not for us to understand one another and to celebrate or to validate one another and to emotionally support each other, but rather to really, really use that to make us divided. So there are different ways to view those differences. We're either looking at those differences, such as we're doing to heal each other, or we're looking at those differences from the capitalist point of view, from a managerial class who wants to say, if those people back right there, they see too much commonality between them, they're going to rise up against me. Mm-hmm. So I have to make sure they understand that they're different. So I'm going to go support them. I'm going to go support the LGBT movement. Yes, they're not the same, and we're not here, and and yes, feminists and those men are trying to take away, or that's what they're trying to do. So I want us to say there's two ways to look at these differences. And I find those challenges too, Jonathan. I know it's constantly in my mind. How do I acknowledge the differences between people, but also not see myself too different from them? Constantly. It's a constant challenge in my mind. So I don't want to invalidate anybody, and especially as we're having this discussion, invalidate straight men who do have challenges that are unique to them, that I've also faced them when I've been in heterosexual relationships, the way people perceive me, and the many areas that we already discussed that I don't want to get into because of the time. So anyhow, I welcome this discussion and appreciate you bringing this up. Any last words, anybody?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing this up, Jonathan. I mean, I don't know if this is how you're thinking of why you brought it up, but for me, you've brought up a forbidden topic that is not supposed to be talked about. You've made it more likely that somebody who's listening to this might get irritated at our show. But I think that those are the very topics that I want to talk about, are the ones that are the challenging ones, because those are the areas, if we're going to speak truthfully about them, that are going to be the way, like Eduardo said, that we will heal together rather than just allow ourselves to be siloed away in different divides. So that's what I hope comes from discussions like this. And it's definitely given me, by saying, hey, let's talk about it. It's definitely given me some things, like it's made me think about more deeply about what it is to be raised as a man in this society.
No, I appreciate you both for sharing your point of view and sharing the the vision of how you guys want it to be, and I've myself learned throughout this conversation, the possibilities and opportunities that are out there. Um, for example, like uniting and also having um, less of a division and seeing it in a different perspective, where the ruling people who are at the top are really trying to distract us with all these issues that we face in our society. I I'm not someone who is an activist or proactive in as an activist, or anyone that organizes movements, but I do think that having the conversation with people like yourselves can have an open eye and a difference now for an open conversation to see it in a different way. And I think that's fine. I think that's okay. I, would like to see maybe perhaps in the possible future to discuss what that may look like and how that can be pursued. But um, I definitely feel that it's a process and it's going to take time. And I think that we do need to challenge ourselves, whether you're from the LGBT community or whether you're from the men's movement or whatever movement that you are. We do need to challenge ourselves and really be honest with ourselves. What is it that we really want to aim for? What is it that we're trying to set our goals for? Are we really trying to divide and have, this government to control us in a way where we're all puppets, or are we trying to unite and have a real movement that we can, outthrow the higher class and stuff?
Mhm.
I'll be honest with you, and I just wrap up with this. There was a time where I kind of felt that way, but I think life, when you go through experiences and you see a division, even in a job, if you're trying to be part of a union, or if you're trying to, be part of a protest and you don't see results, or you see people dividing, or they say they will back you up, or they'll say they'll
Yep.
be with you right there, you lose hope because you don't see it anymore. You don't see the vision. And I think that's kind of what happened to me, where I just sort of accepted for the society that we have today, and I have to worry about myself. Have I got caught up with certain movements or certain, issues that I may agree with? Absolutely, 100%. I think all of us have.
Mhm.
But I do think that um, I can explore it back again. I've always wanted to do something revolutionary. I think that's always been inside me. But I think I've also accepted the fact that when you hit reality and you face life, you lose it. You don't have hope anymore, and you find a different route where you use the same system itself and to try to capitalize something different, to try to make differences in your own personal life. Because at the end of the day, right, if I'm putting in the time and effort for other people, but they don't put the same time for me, it's like, well, then fuck it. I'm not going to do
Mhm.
that.
Yep.
I'm here for me and my family, and how we can use the system to try to get ahead. I think that's where I'm at. And I've been like that for maybe, I would say, the last 7 years, 8 years of my life. But I am glad that you guys opened up to me and shared your ideas. And maybe that's a possibility that I can go back to maybe thinking that mindset, but I don't know.
You said some real truth there, so I think that's a good way to. It's not a happy truth. It's not a fun truth, but it is the truth, and you're not the only person who feels that way. So I think more likely, more people feel like you do than feel hope, genuine hope about like, oh yeah, we're going to make a change right now. I think most people don't. And by the way, I agree with you about protests too. I've kind of been done with that, and now it's just about okay, how do I make real change around me with people I want to make change with? So I appreciate what you're saying.
All right. Well, thank you, Jonathan. That does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog on what'sleftpodcast.com. Again, that's what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you fancy anything you've heard, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on the Spotify, iTunes, Podcast, BitChute, Odyssey, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. You can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes wherever you found this episode. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog, such as Jonathan has done. And thank you, Jonathan, for doing such thing so that we can cover something different, or an idea, excuse me, as I'm falling from my chair. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host Andy Lipson. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Ciao.